Okay.
All right, I will start with introductions. First, we have Jasmine Sherman as a unique woman who uses they, them pronouns, stylish, exuberant, caring, committed, and petty. This isn't a run-of-the-mill campaign because they're not a run-of-the-mill human being. Jasmine has worked directly with at-risk and vulnerable communities and will bring their years of experience from the street all the way to the Oval Office. Jasmine's campaign is dedicated to concrete policy changes designed to benefit all. Defunding police, clean energy distribution, gender and racial justice, universal basic income, universal health care with prescription coverage, prison reform, and the end of private for-profit prisons. Total overhaul of the education system, guaranteed housing, abolish disability restrictions, legalize all guns with proper education, and sign on the Convention of the Rights of the Child. Jasmine believes these are common sense steps our country must take to raise the standard of living for all of us. I will go ahead and start with Mr. Chamat. What would you prefer I call you?
Call me Mike. It's easier to pronounce. Although you did nail the last name, but you can call me Mike.
So, Mike, there are approximately 500,000 child farm workers in the United States. Many of these children start working as young as age 8 and work 72-hour weeks, which is more than 10 hours per day. How will you protect these children?
Well, as President of the United States, you don't have direct authority over how the counties enforce regulations, state regulations in this area, but you can certainly talk a blue streak about how important it is to protect the opportunities that our youngsters are able to take advantage of at the local level. And I certainly would do that. My own personal feeling is that counties throughout most of the United States do a pretty good job of holding parents accountable in terms of making sure kids go to school and that they're not overworked. Obviously, as your question implies, there are a number of children who are falling between the cracks. I think the 500,000 number might mislead some of our listeners because it includes 16 and 17-year-olds. I don't see anything wrong with youngsters starting to work even earlier than 16. I think that that's a parental call, but I have no problem with counties doing a good job, as I believe in most cases they are, of making sure that parents are doing a good job taking care of their children. Responsibility must lie with the parents, of course, and in most cases it does, and that's the way it should be.
Thank you. Jasmine, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah, can I have the question again, please? I'm sorry.
There are approximately 500,000 child farm workers in the United States. Many of these children start working as young as age 8 and work 72-hour work weeks. How will you protect these children?
So one of the things that we need to do in the United States is to provide children with rights. This is the only country where children do not have actual rights. So one of the things that, as the president, you can do is sign on to the Convention Rights of the Child. So that's the first thing I would do. And currently, while presidents don't have that authority, an executive order could be signed or created to give the people, the presidents, the authority to protect all peoples. Because while it should be the parents' responsibilities, we have to understand that parents are subjected to oppression from corporations, and farmers are corporations first abusing those children. A child can't sign up to work a schedule that isn't available. So we have to put the onus with triple bottom line accounting on corporations that are doing unethical practices as well. I yield my time.
Are you for or against all company business organizations creating unions to protect the people that work for the company?
I am against a corporation creating a union for their workers. I think if the staffers want to create their own union, I completely support them unionizing and advocating for themselves. I do not think that the employer or the company can be trusted to have the best interests of the worker in mind. I yield.
Thank you. Mike?
Jasmine nailed it. I should probably just yield. Yes, everybody has the right to free association, including unions. It's one of the big reasons why the United States avoided more socialism than was on the railroad tracks coming our way in the early 20th century, the development of unions. I don't like the idea of corporations dominating unions because, as Jasmine points out, there's an independence issue that really gets undermined. It's a recipe for corruption. Not that there isn't enough corruption in both unions and corporations from time to time anyway, but when a corporation dominates and controls a union, I think it's really a recipe for disaster. And there are plenty of circumstances in which workers are significantly better off without unionizing, and we don't want to undermine those opportunities as well. I think that we've discovered that over the last 2 generations in the United States throughout many industries.
We'll be moving on to environment, and how will you hold corporations that pollute our air and water accountable?
So one of the policies that are on my website that people can go review are a triple bottom line accounting policy that we should be switching to. We know that corporations care about profit, their bottom dollar, their bottom line. It's the most important thing. But we need to actually charge them for the human costs and the environmental costs. Something that I would like to use as an example is recently in Amazon, 6 Amazon workers were killed in a natural disaster. Amazon bears the brunt of that because they did not allow those employees to go home. They threatened them with the loss of employment to keep them there. Those people lost their lives because Amazon was greedy. That should be charged to their bottom line. So that is how we're going to make sure that corporations take it seriously. We're going to speak in a language they understand, which is money, because capitalism is important, right? I yield.
Thank you. Mike?
Well, of course, being able to hold individual corporations, any sort of legal person accountable for the results of their actions is the holy grail of any system, right? And in the economics literature, we've had a couple of 100 years of pursuing just how to hold people accountable, whether it's a certain type of tax or a certain type of fee when they impose the cost of their doing business, whether it's pollution or lack of safety or anything else, on the rest of humanity. We call these externalities. The problem is that as a practical matter, it's extremely difficult to do so, not just in terms of getting tax in place or getting courts to hold people accountable, but to determine what are the costs of anyone's bad behavior, corporations or otherwise. Jasmine brought up an example of Amazon. I don't know much about. I've heard this case where the Amazon employees suffered because of apparently alleged some decision made by Amazon. They should be held accountable. Courts should be willing to hold corporations accountable when they make mistakes, if they have engaged in policies that undermine safety, if they have pressured individuals into doing something that Amazon knew and didn't disclose was wrong. Absolutely. But it is very, very difficult to hold people accountable, but that we should, and the court system is the right way to do that. In certain circumstances, it's class action lawsuits, for example. But so often we get sort of mixed up in the political process and impose a regulation or a law that turns out to be a ham-handed way of going at it without good economics or sound science behind it, and that's to be avoided, of course.
Thank
I respond.
you. Please.
I just want to make sure I understood. So the question was for us to explain how we would stop corporations from abusing the environment.
How would you hold corporations that pollute our air and water accountable? Yes.
Okay. My response is that we have a plan. It's on fatsocialist.com that explains our triple bottom line policy, it isn't that hard to say how we are going to make this. Like, I don't want you guys to vote for me with no plan. There is a plan. It's very easy. We have numbers on our website to answer that. Triple bottom line accounting is the plan. Over. I yield.
Mike, do you want to respond to that?
Well, it's not that simple. You can't just impose on a corporation, some sense of this is how I want you to do business. We do need to hold them accountable when they make mistakes, when they impose externalities on their communities. We need to hold them accountable, and the court system is the appropriate way to do that.
The next question is, what is your plan on providing clean water across the United States?
This has become a huge issue, hasn't it? And shame on us as a nation for not recognizing, I would argue, as many as 100 years ago, but absolutely starting 75 years ago, we knew this was going to be a problem out west. Politicians stepped in and took over the processes for allocating water in California and other western states, and now we see the results of bad public policy. It's really a shame. So the answer, I don't mean to sound glib about this, because the answer is difficult without being complicated, if I can draw a distinction between difficult and complicated. The answer is to get government out of it. If we had imposed a market system on the allocation of water back in the 1930s, we wouldn't have the problem we do now, where California, for example, the primary example, has been in the business of overusing too great an allocation of water for now 3 generations of citizens, expanding the populations in certain instances way beyond what they could have been sustained in a rational water allocation system. Processes, landscaping, farming have expanded in certain places where they had no business being, but for cheap, unnaturally cheap access to water. And we have abused our water availability to such a point where now we're in real trouble. So we need to impose a market system so that some of these secondary uses of water can be reduced.
Thank you. Jasmine, what is your plan on providing clean water across the United States?
So part of my plan for electing me is guaranteed housing, no more rent, no more mortgage. With that, it requires that the government go ahead and make sure all of the housing that we have available for people is clean, livable, safe, and up to standards. While we're doing that, we're going to make sure we provide atmospheric pressure generators within every home. So it does a couple things. It creates jobs, so we put Americans back to work again, and it guarantees that by taking the moisture out of the air, that if individuals have access to clean water directly in their home. That's a guarantee. We also need to go ahead and clean out all of the pipelines. And so what that means is that's a major infrastructure project that we're going to be doing across America to bring Americans clean water. And this plan is not currently available yet, but it will be on fatsocialist.com within the next 3 months, spelling out exactly how we're going to bring you clean water. But a big part of it is available on fatsocialist.com under our Housing for All policy already. I yield my time.
Are we allowed to jump in just for a moment?
Would you like to make a rebuttal? That is fine.
Yeah, a rebuttal might be an overstatement, but a comment. The idea of subsidizing housing is really bad economics, especially in a country like the United States. That's what leads to overconsumption and shortages in terms of good housing. That's exactly what went wrong with our water policy. We need to get bad public policy out of our housing markets. So much of our housing problems have been caused by bad policy. It's what's led to segregation in terms of wealthy and poor. It's what's led to difficult neighborhoods in terms of crime, concentrations of problematic communities. we have bad housing policy in the United States. And I know that Jasmine has, as I have, we've spent years thinking about and worrying about the effects of and the causes of poverty in the United States. And bad housing policy is one of them.
May I respond?
Please.
Okay. Mike, I love that you are an industry professional and that because you are an industry professional, you don't make opinions on things you haven't read. Have you read my housing policy by any chance?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I just heard you say no mortgage, no rent.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. I just wanted to acknowledge and clarify you have not read my policy, so you can't make a critique on it at this time because you haven't had a chance to evaluate it. But luckily...
No, and I won't. I just meant subsidizing housing is a bad idea.
However, I wanted to clarify. Like you said, you have not read it, so you cannot make an evaluation on something you haven't read. Unlike most other
No, but I do know a heck of a lot about subsidizing housing.
I'm sure you do, but you can't even tell me how I'm going to do that, can you? You can't. You haven't read it.
No.
So before you say something that you are, because right now you're speaking from a place of uninformedness, and we don't want to do that. You're a professional.
No, that's not true. I'm an industry expert on housing policy, and I'm here to tell you, if you subsidize it, you'll screw up the market even worse than it is.
Again, you don't know how I'm going to be doing that, so you have no way to fathom what's happening. You're just speaking from your experience. You have not read it. You don't have any inkling on what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, how I would account for it, anything. You're not even taking into account that I do have an MBA in finance, and it's possible that we're both economic professionals. But all I wanted to say is you haven't read it, and it is usually unsafe to take the opinion of someone commenting on something they have not read. That's it.
Well, does your plan subsidize housing?
No, it doesn't.
Then how do you get rid of rent and mortgages?
You should definitely go read it.
Or you could just tell me.
No. So this is a debate about policy and our plans. All I'm saying is you made a critique and you were not informed. This is not a lecture where I'm coming to educate you. This is a debate. You don't know and you're speaking on something you don't know. That's all.
Well, you're right. So I should limit my comments
to
to
things
what
that you
I
know.
am expert in, and that is subsidizing housing is a really bad idea with bad experiences in the United States and elsewhere, and ruins markets and ruins the lives of people.
And good thing that the plan I wrote doesn't just do it like that. So what's the next question, moderator? Because this is clearly not going to work.
Yes. Mike, approximately 19 million Americans do not have access to high-speed internet. How will you give access to what has quickly become a necessary utility?
Well, a lot of local governments are pushing on this, but so are a lot of local corporations with commercial interests. So this number has been dwindling rapidly over the last few years. Schools, for example, and libraries have made huge progress in terms of making it available in a public way. But at the household level, it continues to be a real challenge. And I'm heartened to see that number has come way down for a number of new technologies. Elon Musk, for example, recently instituted a program whereby which folks like me who live in the middle of nowhere can get access anyway. So I was really heartened to see that. I believe that in the next 10 years, that number will really plummet because of new technologies being brought to bear so that virtually anybody, once he gets a certain number of satellites up, there won't be anyone in the United States who can't get internet service.
Thank you. Jasmine, approximately 19 million Americans do not have access to high-speed internet. How will you give access to what has quickly become a necessary utility?
So one of the things that we are going to do is take the lead as the federal government and stop relying on private entities or organizations to wait for it to be expedient or fiscally important for them to get involved. We are going to say that in America, Everyone needs the internet. And so as the federal government, we're going to take that on and just go ahead and provide internet in places that already do need infrastructure work. So while we're redoing the pipes, the roads, because everyone knows there's potholes everywhere, while we're going ahead and doing that, let's just go ahead and lay the technology down to bring places like Appalachia and other more rural environments the internet. They can't afford to wait 10 years. Their kids need an education now, and so do they for the most part. We don't have time to keep waiting for corporations to decide it's in their interest to help the public. Let's just go ahead and help the public now because it's in our interest. I yield.
Jasmine, with many states having homelessness problems, would you consider having states create better housing assistance programs to get people off the streets?
No, I wouldn't. I would just go ahead and end houselessness in America. And you, for anyone that's curious, can go read my plan at fatsocialist.com. Not only do we explain how we end houselessness in the Americas in 90 days, we also explain how we're going to pay for it without raising any of your taxes or adjusting the military spending budget. I yield.
Thank you. Mike?
No, I haven't read Jasmine's plan, but mathematics suggests that you cannot turn water into wine. You cannot provide housing for free to everybody because housing is not free. And subsidizing it is the recipe for disaster in terms of overall housing policy. So it just, it's that sort of thing just doesn't begin to make sense. Homelessness is not at its core a housing policy problem. It's a real people problem. I've worked with homeless for 11 years as a police officer in South Broward County, and I can tell you it's a huge challenge. There is a certain population that does want to get off the streets, and there are good programs in the private sector and public sector. Different communities have different mixes of those that do a good job of getting people into certain types of housing, certain types of jobs, and to help people get on their feet. Then there's another segment of the population that is more difficult to work with, that literally does not want to follow the traditional path of getting off the street. Sometimes there's mental illness involved or substance abuse. And sometimes it's just a matter of people don't want to get off the street. These are huge challenges for us. And I'm a big advocate for the very local programs that are in place, including the private sector programs. The ones that I've worked with in the private sector are excellent and actually much better than the public sector programs, which is not to say that there aren't counties across the United States that are doing a good job with this. But it's a big problem. And it is not mostly a housing problem. It is mostly a people problem, working with individuals that have real challenges.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll move on to foreign affairs. Mike?
Can I respond to that last part?
Yes.
I agree with Mike. It isn't just about the structure. I agree with him. It is more about the structure. I mean, it isn't as much about the structure. We need to trust the scientists and use a housing first policy to help our people who have some mental health issues, which is exactly why we must offer, in my plan, universal health care, which fatsocialist.com definitely tells you how we pay for it. And we've done so without raising your taxes or increasing or infringing on your military budget. Just to let you guys know, I agree. We can't just take care of the structure. We've got to take care of the whole human, like Mike said.
Thank you, Jasmine. Mike, do you have a comment or shall I continue?
Not much. No, you can't provide services without cost because services have cost. Jasmine's mentioned a couple of times that she would do things without infringing on the military budget. I hope that she doesn't say that for my benefit. I would love to infringe on the military budget. I wouldn't do it in order to provide free housing for people. I would do it to return funds to taxpayers, but that may come up in the next set of questions.
Thank you.
My pronouns are they, them.
I apologize if I said otherwise.
Mike, what is the U.S.'s responsibility in supporting international institutions such as the United Nations, NATO, and the International Criminal Court?
Those are three very disparate examples. Interesting. You should bring them up in one sentence. Legally speaking, we've signed on to NATO. I'm a big advocate of getting out of NATO. I think NATO no longer serves our interests. We could debate all day long whether NATO ever served our interests, but certainly at this point, NATO does not. I would actually argue that we are not undermining our own international interests, but the interests of European nations as well, who need to learn how to step up and provide for their own defense. Ukraine is a perfect example of how we threatened to bring a country into NATO and helped incentivize the invasion of that poor country. We negotiated their reduction in arms, particularly in terms of nuclear warheads, making them vulnerable. We have undermined European nations' expenditures to take care of themselves and discouraged European nations from helping Ukraine in ways that they should be doing instead of pretending that it's our responsibility, which it absolutely is not. In terms of the criminal courts, as a practical matter, as an ethical matter, I think that we should be coordinating with other nations in terms of pursuing international criminals. Absolutely. I don't think that necessarily implies setting up some external international court to do so, right? International crimes are crimes within each nation as well. So any particular nation where a crime has been committed can prosecute a criminal without an external court. And the other one you mentioned was the United Nations, which has, great intentions notwithstanding, has become a bit of a joke, internationally speaking, over the last 20 years. It's a real shame. I kind of missed the seriousness of the United Nations, but it is long gone, and I don't see a reason to keep participating.
Thank you. Jasmine, what is the U.S.'s responsibility in supporting international institutions such as the United Nations, NATO, and the International Criminal Court?
America doesn't have it. We need to pull out of all of those joke institutions. I agree with Mike. NATO costs us $550 million a year. When we needed them most, they literally didn't do that job. We're wasting taxpayer money. I would pull out of all of those. United Nations, all it does is hamper us in the international discourse. Like, it's not helping us. I would pull out of that and save Americans money. And I mean, basically all of those are jokes. They're nice things on paper to say we're a part of so we can get the warm squishies, but I'm not about that. I'm about saving Americans money and putting our interests on things that we care about. And those issues, for anybody that has questions, my foreign policy is posted at fatsocialist.com, and you can see that America is no longer going to be the pocketbook for the rest of the world. We need our own coins because we don't have it for them. We barely have it for us, and it's time to prioritize Americans. I yield my time.
Thank you.
Well said.
Jasmine, would you make the process of coming to America easier if people wish to live here?
Yes, we need to go back to the immigration policy of 1892. When people were going to Ellis Island, it worked for us then, it works for us now. The difference is we need to have better standards on how we do things. And my immigration policy is not on my website, but it will be in months to come. But we definitely need to go back to the way it used to be. This is definitely stolen land.
Thank you. Mike.
Yeah, Jasmine's right. We should probably save time here, too, and just move on. We need a more pro-immigration and more pro-immigrant policy. The way we treat people on the way into the United States is truly an embarrassment and unethical at a very fundamental level. I like the way she said sort of a Ellis Island type of approach. We do have a problem at the southern border in terms of onboarding people, right? Yes, I believe the citizens of any nation have the right to vet people as they come in, but this should be no more difficult than vetting people to do anything else in the United States. I mean, we can clear people into the White House in like 45 minutes, but we have this enormous period of time to bring people into the United States more generally. that's just absolute silliness. Uh, as everybody knows, I'm a big opponent of big government and wasting resources. But if this is one of those few places, if we need to surge some attorneys to the border to, to get them out of messing with the rest of my life, if we need to surge attorneys to the border to help vet people in 45 minutes to get them into the United States where they can become productive citizens, I'm all for it. And as long as I'm burning up time here in support of Jasmine, let me continue to say that there is a misperception in the United States that immigration is bad for us. It is so untrue. Immigration is very good for the United States in any number of ways, especially culturally, especially ethically, the way we relate to the rest of the world. But it is also true that people who come to the United States commit fewer crimes, use fewer public resources relative to the taxes they pay than people born in the United States. So even if you were just a cold-hearted economist, you would still want to improve our immigration speed.
How do you feel about the way the experience of nations have demonstrated the effectiveness of capitalism and socialism in terms of lifting people out of poverty?
Sure, thanks. As an economist, this is one of the things that we look at on a cross-experience, cross-sectional basis. It is clear that the ability of nations to let go of control at the national level, at the governmental level, to let go of control of their economies is a key ingredient, a key link in driving the expansion of economic opportunity, economic growth, and to consequently lift people out of poverty.
Are you sure about that?
In effect, the development of free markets is responsible for lifting literally billions of people out of poverty across the world over the past 100 years. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We now know that the more control a government imposes on an economy, the more it limits the ability of individuals to expand their economic horizons and horizons in terms of just personal and human development. We see this over time as well as across nations. We see this in Asia, where the Chinese economy, for example, lags desperately behind our own. And in Latin America, you even see examples where nations have gone from wealthy to poor because of socialism. Argentina, Venezuela, Cuba, for examples. And, today we have our problems in the United States, but nobody can compete with us in terms of creating opportunities for individuals and high incomes.
Thank you. Jasmine, how do you feel about the way the experiences of nations have demonstrated the effectiveness of capitalism and socialism in terms of lifting people out of poverty?
So I don't believe that there's ever been a true example of socialism being in any government, right? They have the title, they have the moniker, but they've never had an opportunity to be a socialist nation without the influence or intrusion of other capitalist nations determined to make sure that those socialist economies fail. Now, I maintain that America is a capitalist nation. It's always going to be a capitalist nation, and no one's trying to do that. But we do have a lot of irresponsibility in our government that has led to the negative impact on other governments. There's never been any pure form of socialism anywhere. There's never been any pure form of communism anywhere. Everywhere around the world, we have imperialism impacting or placing its finger on the scale. More importantly, we should be focused on how in capitalism, in our country, we have too many people that are not uplifted out of poverty. Whatever the talking point is about how great capitalism is, in this country, we have too many people falling short. Too many people who can't afford a $500 in emergency. Capitalism in its state in this country is not lifting people out of poverty. It's exploiting them, and I yield my time.